Sometimes sports just oversaturated and over commercial, and it's good to call it out when it's terrible. Other times it serves like a social function that is needed. And another thing that sports are is propaganda, but they're not just propaganda. They're a memory. They're an identity. They're one of the few things that still like make people feel alive and feel like happy. That's why sports are powerful, and that's also why sports are dangerous. But yeah, in regards to what I was just saying with sports washing and statecraft, yeah, there's this underlying myth how people always say, like, sports are the opiate of the masses. And I don't think that's true because opiates numb people. I would say that, like, sports is the cocaine of the masses because it's a language that people actually use when everything around them has turned static. Like, no one gives an absolute shit about C-SPAN, about politics, about like watching a parliamentary session. They don't care about think tanks. They don't care about government policy. They care about the Edmonton Oilers. They care about what the next big UFC card is or when the Champions League final match is. That's where people's emotions live now. That's where people's like personal story exists. And this is the reason why I've started like pivoting towards sports in like a socioeconomic, materialist, political lens, but also being able to enjoy the sport is because I actually want to reach people. And by doing that, I have to start where they are. And that's why I've shifted focus. I'm not going to be lecturing anyone from a podium. I'm talking through the terms that the people that I'm talking about understand, things that I understand. And the things that I understand, a great deal of what I understand is hockey, combat sports, and just like general sports rivalries and like the absurdity of the sports business in the West, like absurd trades and freak comebacks and all of that stuff. I have like a encyclopedia mind for sports. These aren't apolitical pastimes. It's like a cultural grammar. It's how people process the collective feeling of living in this deadened world. So it's really important not to dismiss sports or people who engage heavily in sports. It's important to expose the contradictions and show that behind every wrist shot and every spinning back fist, there's like a political structure, a message that's being sent. That concept of like the medium is the message. It applies to sports too. You just have to have the eyes to see it. And once you have the eyes to see it, you see it everywhere. This is another reason why I'm doing this is because, let's be honest, I've talked about this before. There's no real like actual left sports media in North America. Like none. You've got liberal sports media who do the performative outrage, virtue signaling as sound bites, rainbow capitalism, and the Steve Dangle types. And then you also have the just hardened neoliberal, the more centrist moderate type of like NFL type branding, like halftime commercials that are brought to you by Lockheed Martin or some other type of weapons manufacturer. But there's no like materialist critique of sports, not in North America, at least not on like a big scale. And I'm not saying that that's what I want to do. Like, I mean, that's what I want to do, and not, I don't have like delusions of grandeur. I just like, I feel like it's needed because like football in Europe has radical podcasts, like it has radical football podcasts. South America has anti-fascist supporters and anarchist soccer zines. In North America, we get Atlantic pieces about how the NBA is leading in mindfulness and inclusion. And I'm not here to add to that. I'm here to build something that doesn't exist exactly in the current moment. I want to fill that gap, catch the tide while it's rising, to analyze like the ownership structure of these leagues, the extractive land deals, wage theft in sports as a whole, but, in certain and the more exploitive sports, like in combat sports, identifying like the pipelines and like the colonization and the settler myth making, because that's what sports media could be. It just refuses to be. And that's where I want to come in. And I'm not here to do like progressive sports coverage because most of that is like what I've talked about before, is that moralizing garbage. It's just like jersey discourse, anthem discourse. Who wore the right patch on their sleeve? Empty gestures repackaged as morals and virtues and ethics. And it's not that there isn't a place for identity politics because people, liberals got to start somewhere, but it needs to not be used as just this like empty vapid window dressing. A rainbow logo doesn't mean anything if the arena is built on stolen indigenous land and helped gentrify a neighborhood that created extreme poverty and an unhoused crisis. Like, your team isn't progressive if that's the case, right? Like the new arena at Edmonton is a great example of that. That's not progress. That's like literally reputation washing. And I don't want to be the leftist version of like Sportsnet Pride Night. I'm not here to moralize who gave a standing ovation and who didn't give a standing ovation to the person of a diverse gender. I'm here to say, what is the system clapping for and why? Because when fans push back against their teams, when they boo, when they jeer, when they yell, even when players do this, right? It breaks that sanitized script. The same pundits who tell us like sports are unifying turn around and start scolding them and calling them classless. You've seen it again and again and again. Like, fans boo some type of like venture of some type, either if it's like a hollow progressive venture, like a Pride Night thing, or on the other side where it's like a right-wing statecraft type thing where it's like Ron DeSantis comes out or whatever. Or even when people throw a jersey on the ice. Like, instead of asking why, the media just moralizes. They say it's classless. They treat all of these breaches of etiquette like it's a hate crime. And every silent protest like it's some type of bad branding or like bad reflection of the individual fan base. But the answer is that's what happens. This is what happens in a decaying political culture. People don't know what to do with their anger, so they express it at a sporting event. And with media pundits, their job is to manage that dissent, to keep it toothless, to keep it symbolic, to keep it in bounds. And I don't want to do that. I'm not here to manage people's outrage. I'm here to just give it more clarity and structure. And this is the thing. This is like my beef, not like in a personal way, but just in the way of like how people's communities and the type of like media that people are presenting, like Steve Dangle. He's built an entire brand off yelling into a webcam about how the Leafs essentially made him feel bad and hurt his feelings. And somehow that's what passes as like critical sports analysis in this country, when it's not critical at all. It's cathartic. It's spectacle. And I get it. He's not my enemy. He's just the product of what I am critiquing. He channels that frustration into a cycle that benefits the team owners, the media corporations, and the sponsors. And by doing that, he serves as like it's self-replication of the team itself. And by becoming that, he acts as like a release valve. Because then instead of people demanding, they have this personality to follow. And I'm not interested in being a release valve or like getting involved in like drama, like, oh, that dude sucks. Like, I think he sucks, but I also think he's like a really good broadcaster and a really good like media talent, etc. But I just don't like the way in which they operate as far as like how they maintain their community, and just like playing with it's just very bad. To after a couple of years in, it's not the end of the world, but at this point you have to avoid looking at it rationally, because at this point any rational fan would have walked away by now. But I don't want to represent that. I'm not going to yell into the void for likes. I'm trying to like trace that frustration back to the structures that cause it. You know, everyone's wrestling with shadows and don't know where these things come from or why we're doing it. And so I'm going to ask, in the realm of sports, why do we always feel so powerless? Why does it feel like nothing ever changes? And why does it feel like the people who profit from all of this stay exactly the same, regardless of how like upset we are about the product that they're putting on the ice or on the field or on the court? And that's why when I say I'm going to really dive into this through like the lens of sport, I really mean it. Because like this isn't just content for me. It's legitimately like healing, like intervention. The World Cup is coming to Canada next year, and it's not going to be some feel-good celebration of multiculturalism. It's going to be a spectacle of corporate greenwashing, nationalist branding, and settler erasure, essentially. FIFA is going to bulldoze communities with mass gentrification. It's going to help cities suspend labor laws, and then it's going to slap rainbow decals on stadiums, and everyone's going to call it progressive. And most people will just watch and not say anything and not critique what they're seeing. Or most people will say, oh, I hate that. I'm going to be somewhere in the middle, because that's what you need to do. You need to engage with people where they're at so that you can explain what they're seeing, so that they understand, one, you can be a fan of sports, and two, you can also be deeply against the structure that upholds it and prevents it from being more human. And so yeah, I'll be here streaming, watching the games, and hoping that everyone else is enjoying it and getting something, both entertainment and maybe knowledge based out of it. And I look to pull the curtain back essentially while watching whatever sporting event I'm streaming while doing it. You know, that includes like naming the land that the stadium sits on, the history of the team names, etc. Like, and also like naming the corporations that are funding the events and the spectacle and the teams and the tournaments, right? Naming the journalists who bury the real stories or serve as mouthpieces for the statecraft that's doing the reputation washing for these like authoritarian regimes or whatever. It's all there. But it's important to know, like, I'm not against sports. My content is not about canceling people who like sports. It's literally the exact opposite. It's a love-hate relationship, and you have to understand that that's the nuance. There's a duplicity. It's not a binary framework. It's a fluid duplicity. Sometimes sports just oversaturated and over-commercial, and it's good to call it out when it's terrible. Other times, it serves like a social function that is needed. And another thing that sports are is propaganda. But they're not just propaganda. They're a memory. They're an identity. They're one of the few things that still like make people feel alive and feel like happy. That's why sports are powerful. And that's also why sports are dangerous. That's why they matter. And I grew up with this. You grew up with this. We all grew up with this. Whether you were on the ice, in the stands, on the field, or just watching with your family. Sports are a part of who we are. They're how we make sense of pride, failure, pain, connection, letdown. And that's exactly why they've been hijacked by end stage capitalism. And I'm not here to get in the way of that. I'm just here to help people's disillusionment go in the right direction. And I'm not also here to rescue it. I'm here to say, yes, as is, sports can still be beautiful, but only if we stop pretending that it's innocent, that people just watch it to get away, or just it's escapism. Because yes, it is escapism, but it's an escapism that it's like, why do we need this escapism so bad? And why do we have these like emotional battlegrounds where ideologies, like it's fought out, regional ideologies fought out on fields and sheets of ice, etc. So with all that, like, yeah, I'm not going to be just streaming. I'm not going to be just watching games. I'm doing it about like things that matter, where people feel something real, where nationalism gets a standing ovation, where oil companies buy legitimacy with ad space, where genocide gets whitewashed into Olympic glory. And that's why I'm doing this, because that's where the culture war actually lives, not in the university seminar, not on, the CNN panels, on the ice, in the octagon, on the pitch, on the court. That's where empire shows its face. And if we don't call it out, then no one does. And then the lie wins by default. And so this is why I pivoted to sports, and this is my explanation as to why. And it's not because I don't like people who watch sports or comment on sports, because I love them. That's how I got into doing content in the first place. You have to. You love the poetry, the romanticism, the stories, the skill, the humanism. You love the way that sports lights up an entire city, country. You see something like extraordinary happen that you don't see with almost anything. But that's also why it's been buried under that darkness of capitalism. And once you see it, it's really hard to not see it. But that doesn't mean that it needs to take the joy away, because the joy is not, I don't want to erase the joy. It's just about knowing like what you're being sold and who it's being sold to and why. So anyways, what I'm talking about is I'm not just going to be doing sports. I'm not just going to be doing politics. What I'm doing is like the intersection of both. Statecraft, propaganda in the form of like culture, in the form of sports. The theater of empire draped in a jersey. And for my goal here will be like to drag it into the light. One stream, one episode, one game, one match at a time. Watch the game, but know the game too. Follow the money, follow the narratives, follow the poetry of it all. And yeah,